Welcome back to another episode of the Close Smarter Academy. I'm your host, Chris McGeady, and today is day 3 of the 25 days of Christmas. Yesterday was about the gift of calm, and well, I say yesterday, but I'm going to be completely transparent here. If you're watching on YouTube, I have the same shirt on, is because I forgot to record the day 2 recording. So I did day 2 today, about 20 minutes ago, and here's day 3. It is actually day 3 today, so anyway, I digress. So the gift of calm was all about slowing the conversation down. Now, day 3, I'm actually going to tell a story of one of my earlier sales calls, which at the end of this was a successful sales call, but it changed the trajectory of how I treat my sales calls from that day forward. And you'll see why in a second. And I'm going to keep it pretty vague because the people that we helped in this scenario are still to this day, and I want to say this was probably 4 or 5 years ago, to this day are still friends of ours and some of our biggest fans in our business. So it goes to show you that, being transparent and really, really understanding what they need, they can be friends for life or fans for life. So here's what happened. I went to sit with a homeowner, and it was one of those houses where when you walked in, I'm looking around, and it took me about 10 seconds to think to myself, like, what am I doing here? This is a beautiful house. I have no business being here because, I was still wet behind the ears, still fairly new to the business, and they were still running belly to belly calls, multiple times a week off of our list. And, you expect to always walk into we're all watching HGTV, right? When you first start out and you're seeing pictures from people on Facebook, and they're going into these hell holes, and they're buying these things with holes in roofs and stuff like that. You don't expect as an investor early on to be walking into a house like this. I mean, it was beautiful. I was confused as to why I was there. So took the tour of the house, having the conversation with the seller, and my whole demeanor was just what I said. It didn't make any sense that I was there. And my assumption was that whatever my offer was not going to be accepted because it was going to be way too low for what this neighborhood could pull. And so I directed my whole conversation in that direction. It was all about, I felt like the best way I could help this person was to feed them off to a realtor, put that house on the market, have a bunch of people come through, and get the most out of that house that they possibly could. So that is how we ended up that conversation. I mean, I stayed there for about a half hour, maybe 45 minutes, and talked. I mean, we had a deeper conversation than that, but at the end of the day, the long and the short of it was I was referring them off to a realtor, one of our realtors. And I said, "You're going to be in good hands here. They'll take good care of you. I think this is where you belong." And left it at that. Now, I want to say this was probably a week or two later. They had had some conversations with the realtor, preparing to list it on the market. I don't think it had hit the market yet. And I got a random phone call, not random, I got a phone call from the seller. They were pretty upset, and they said that they couldn't go through with the listing, and if I could come out to the house and sit down with them again. And I said, absolutely. So it was shortly after that. It might have even been the next day. Knowing me back then, or even now, like if you're willing to sit with me, I'm probably going to get in the car right now and go. If a seller said they wanted to sell me a house right now, I'd probably stop recording this podcast and run over to the house. But anyway, I went to the house, sat, and got the true story. It was probably something I should have gotten on the first call, and I'll kind of walk through what I do now to prevent this situation, because that's my fault. Maybe I didn't know any better, but now that I do, if I was to do that again, I would feel like it was completely my fault and I'm wasting their time when I can truly help them up front. So we ended up buying the house. They were so grateful for it, still to this day. We ended up buying another house off of a referral from them as well, because we did such a good job on that transaction. And then at the end of the day, I feel like we actually truly helped that person. So moving forward, my conversations were completely different. When I walked in, I had, first of all, drop all of your assumptions. I don't care if the house was built yesterday and they closed today, this morning, and they want to sell you the house. Why is it they want to sell you the house? Let's get to that. So what I ask my sellers now is what's most important to them. What I used to ask them is, how much are you looking to get for the house? If you can get the most for the house, is that what we're here for? Do you want, if I'm up against, a couple other people, because sellers are not really shy about that. In some cases, they'll say, we had some other companies coming through. If you're a postcard person and you respond and you go to in-person appointments, then you probably see other postcards sitting on the, on the couch, on the coffee table, on the fridge, on the side tables. There, see other companies there. So there's competition, which is fine. Everybody's in the same game to win. But when they tell you, hey, there's other people involved in this, then my thought would always go to, man, I got to beat this guy's price, or I got to beat this girl's price. And then that's not always the case. And I said it yesterday in my day 2 video. Until you get to the true story, you don't know what they're looking for. So we get to that early now. When I have a conversation with them, I want to know what's most important. Is it most important that you get the most money out of this house that you possibly can? Is it most important time, convenience? Like, what is the most important part of this transaction for you? Because in some cases it's time. Like, they're willing to take a discount because they gotta get out of this thing in a couple of weeks. They know we can make that happen. They reach out, let's make it happen. Convenience. Maybe they don't want to be a bunch of people walking through the house, and that could be enough to not have a realtor list the house. Maybe they do want as much money as they can for the house, but at least up front what their expectations are, and that's where we have to start. I did not start there on that call. I sat and I assumed that money was the most important, and it was the furthest from being the most important in that transaction. And after our second conversation, I was upset at myself for not catching that. But at the same time, I was new and I didn't know. I was actually in sales training at the time. So I was still learning this. But it was something in real life that taught me. That was my aha moment when they called back and said, come back to the house, let's sit down and have a recover. After that second conversation, I was thinking, man, how could I have gotten this story out of them in the first conversation? That's my job. That's my job to get that story out of them by asking the right questions. And honestly, I didn't forget about the right questions. I don't think I asked enough questions because my assumption was that they wanted money. And I knew I wasn't going to get them the money that I could possibly get them on the market. So that was my mistake, 1,000%. So here I am to tell you that is my experience with assumptions. And it's very hard in some cases. In some cases, you're going to walk into some situations. You're going to hear things. If you do this on the phone, you're going to hear things that you've heard a million times from other people. And maybe the outcome from those million other people were the same. This one time could be different. So never, ever, ever assume anything based on what somebody tells you on the phone or in person until you ask follow-up questions. And you get the true motivation from them. And not only the true motivation, but the true expectations. What do they want out of this? I mean, I just saying that, I've had people tell me no originally on my price. And when I pressed on that a little bit, I'll say, well, what would work for you? And it wasn't even price. We didn't even negotiate the price down. It was that now that this was becoming real, this transaction was actually a possibility of happening. They started to see all these things in their head, like, man, I got to get a moving truck and I got to get all this crap out of here. And there's 30 years worth of crap in my house. And how am I going to get this out? And that was the thing. Like, I don't know if I can get all this stuff out of the house. And if I sign this, your contract says 30 days. I don't know if I can do that. And I said, I don't know if this will help you or not. If you're taking everything, maybe we can try and help you out in that respect. But if you're not planning on taking everything, feel free to leave what you don't want and take what you do. And that there got us that contract. Because then I didn't assume that it was a bad price when they told me no. I pressed on that a little bit. I wanted to know why it was a no. And when they said, there's the stress of just moving everything, they took maybe 3 boxes worth of stuff out of this house and left everything for us. So that was the only objection they had on the table. If I hadn't asked that follow-up question, I would have taken the no, put them on a 30-day follow-up, maybe lost it to somebody else that did ask the question. So that is today's lesson. No assumptions. The saying about assumptions. I'm not going to repeat it, but no assumptions. And your sales calls will get so much better if you just ask inquisitive questions, get down to the root of the problem, and see why they're actually wanting to sell and why they're wanting to sell to you. So until tomorrow, I'll see you on day 4.